back to Bemidji in nearly 30 years. It's the kind of northern Minnesota town you carry with you in the bones, whether you want to or not. The smell of pine sap, the biting wind off the lake, the way snow muffles the world until it feels like you're walking inside a memory. I left in '91 thinking I was done with the past. But the past has a way of waiting. I returned in mid-January, deep winter, the kind where the sun hangs low, like it's too tired to climb the sky. The lake was frozen solid as it always was this time of year. Families skated near the docks by day, but by night, no one stepped near the shore. No one except me. They say the dead don't speak, but they whisper if you're quiet enough to listen. I wasn't planning to listen, not really. I came back for a break, maybe to chase some kind of personal penance. I was a journalist once. War zones, corruption exposés, missing girls in quiet towns, things I couldn't leave alone. But these days I just wrote for myself, scribbled thoughts in the margins of notebooks, until last month when an old letter arrived. It wasn't signed. No return address. Just 5 words in tight, blocky handwriting. She still skates at midnight. No name, no explanation, no date. But I didn't need any. I knew exactly who she was. Her name was Clara Rowe. If you're not from around here, that name probably means nothing. But back in the '70s, she was everything. 17 years old, state figure skating champion, blonde hair that caught the light like it had been made from the ice itself. Everyone believed she'd go to nationals, maybe even the Olympics. Coaches talked about her with awe. Girls wanted to be her. Boys wanted to date her. And me? I just wanted to be near her. We weren't close. But in a town like Bemidji, proximity is intimacy. Everyone goes to the same diners, the same schools, the same bonfires in the woods. Clara wasn't the kind to show off. She practiced alone most nights long after everyone had gone home, until the night she didn't come home at all. They found her skates the next morning, still tied tight, sitting beside a perfect figure 8 traced on the surface of Lake Bemidji. No cracks in the ice, no footprints leading away, just gone. No body, no splash, no scream. She vanished like a breath in cold air. Back then, no one talked about ghosts. The official story said she ran away. Pressure got to her, that's what the papers wrote. But even as a kid, I knew something didn't add up. Clara loved skating. She didn't fear it. She lived for it. And she'd never leave her boots behind. That's like a preacher walking out mid-sermon without his Bible. The town never recovered. People stopped skating at night. The air around the lake grew heavy, like it was holding its breath. And sometimes, just sometimes, people swore they heard it. The sound of a single pair of blades cutting across the ice, but no one ever saw her. At least, not then. That first night back, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside my motel window howled like it remembered things I didn't. I poured a cup of coffee from the crusty room pot and drove down to the lake. It was empty. Just an endless white stretch, framed by dark pine and winter sky. The surface shimmered under the moon like glass. I stepped onto the dock. Silence, then a low scrape, like metal dragging across a hard surface. I turned my head. Nothing. But the sound came again. Long, slow, deliberate. Shh. Click. Shh. Click. Like a blade on ice, like someone circling the center of the lake. But there was no one there. I stood frozen, literally and otherwise. My breath fogged the air. My hands trembled, not from cold, but from something else, that ancient primal sense that you are being watched by something not meant to be seen. Then I saw it, far out across the frozen lake. A figure, white, small, moving slowly, arms outstretched like a dancer mid-spin. It glided in a perfect oval, over and over again, not faltering, not wavering, just skating, alone. I didn't move, couldn't. She skated for what felt like hours, never closer, never farther, always centered in the lake, always circling, like the lake itself was her stage, her prison, her home. Then, suddenly, she stopped and turned, directly toward me, my lungs locked. Even at that distance, I could feel her gaze. It was sharp, heavy, endless. She lifted one arm and pointed, right at me. Then she vanished, not faded, not walked away. She simply wasn't there anymore. I stumbled back to my truck, drove in a daze. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I checked the motel mirror. My eyes looked older, my hair grayer, like something had pressed the weight of years into my bones overnight. But something inside me had also awakened, something that had been asleep for decades. Call it guilt, call it curiosity, or maybe it was just the sound of her skates still echoing in my ears. I had to know more. Who else had seen her? Why now? Why me? They say time moves slower in small towns, but memories move faster. And in Bemidji, some memories don't fade. They freeze, forever suspended in ice, waiting, watching, ready to skate again. When I returned to Bemidji for winter break, I found the town not just cold, but quieter than I remembered. The kind of silence that fills your chest, not your ears. Lake Bemidji had frozen solid, smooth as glass, stretching wide beneath the cloudy December sky. But even covered in white, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt waiting. I was staying at my Aunt Marlene's place again, the same modest house a few blocks from the lake shore. She hadn't aged much, but there was a weight behind her eyes, heavier than the years could explain. That first evening, while warming our hands over mugs of tea, I asked her the question that had sat on my chest since last winter. "Do you remember the boy who disappeared out on the lake? The skater?" She froze. Her spoon clinked against the side of the cup. She looked at me, then out the frosted window. "People don't like talking about that," she said finally, "especially this time of year." I wanted to push more, but something in her voice, tight and low, told me to let it go. At least for now. But the dreams came back that night. I was standing alone on the ice, hearing the scrape of skates circling me in the darkness. I couldn't see who it was. The fog was thick and low, clinging to the ground. Then, faintly, I saw the outline of a figure gliding toward me. He was wearing old-fashioned skates, a tattered sweater with stripes. I couldn't see his face, but he was smiling, and that smile didn't reach his eyes. When I jolted awake, the room was ice cold, though the heater buzzed in the corner. That next day I walked to the lake. It was midday, but the gray skies made it feel like twilight. The ice looked solid, smooth, inviting, almost. A few kids were skating near the far end. Their laughter echoed across the still air, but it didn't carry warmth. I stood at the edge, the wind tugging at my coat, and I swore I heard it again, the faint slice of skates behind me. But when I turned, no one was there. That evening, I visited the Bemidji Public Library. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe old newspaper archives, maybe any mention of a missing boy, a skating accident, something. The librarian, a wiry woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, looked hesitant when I asked. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked. "I grew up here, actually," I replied, "but I've been away." She nodded slowly, then leaned in. "You mean the thing that skates at night, don't you?" I felt a chill crawl down my back. "You've heard of it?" She looked around the quiet library, then walked to a drawer behind the counter. From it, she pulled a thin manila folder. "Don't tell anyone I showed you this," she said. "People say it's just folklore, but it goes back further than most realize. Inside were yellowed clippings, handwritten letters, even a few photos. Most were vague. Skater disappears on frozen lake. Teen lost during snowstorm. Unexplained crack in lake ice. But one clipping caught my attention. Dated 1948. Local boy Thomas Reed, age 17, presumed drowned after vanishing during evening skate on Lake Bemidji. Skates found at shoreline. No sign of body. Conditions deemed safe. Search teams unsuccessful. Community mourns the loss. There was a photo of Thomas, the same striped sweater, same wide grin. My blood turned to ice. I asked the librarian if she knew more. She nodded. Legend says he loved skating more than anything. He was out there every evening. One night he skated out alone and never came back. They say he skated too far into the fog and was claimed by the lake. Some folks think his spirit never left, that he's still out there, skating, waiting. I walked home, heart pounding. I didn't tell Marlene. I barely slept. That night, I woke to a noise, not a loud one, just rhythmic. Slice, glide, slice. I opened my curtain and looked toward the lake. It was past midnight. Snow fell in slow spirals, and out there on the lake was a figure, alone, skating. Not fast, not flashy, just patient, persistent. I couldn't see his face, just the silhouette, but I knew it was him. The next day, I asked Marlene about Thomas Reed. Her hands froze mid-fold over a towel. She set it down and walked over to the window. "He was my neighbor," she said softly. "We were kids together. He used to race birds on that lake." She looked at me. They never found his body. The ice had taken others, too. Kids who wandered out too far. A snowmobiler who never made it home. Even a fisherman who vanished, leaving only a single glove behind. Each time someone claimed to see a boy skating the night before. Some dismissed it. Winter tricks the eyes. Shadows on the lake. But too many saw the same thing. Too many felt the same cold dread. I decided to talk to someone who might remember even more. The oldest man in Bemidji, old Joe Kinlan, lived in a cabin just outside town. People said he was half ghost himself. But when I mentioned Thomas Reed, his eyes sharpened. "You seen him?" he asked. "I think so." Joe nodded once, as if I'd just passed some kind of test. "You're not crazy. That boy's still out there. Skates in circles, over the spot he died. They say if you watch too long, you hear the ice crack, and then he sees you." I asked him why it kept happening, why the spirit hadn't moved on. Joe shrugged. "Some spirits want peace, others want company." The frost bit harder the next morning, as if the lake itself had taken a breath in the night and exhaled something darker into the air. Emma stood at the kitchen window of their cabin, arms folded tightly across her chest, watching the frozen lake shimmer in the early morning light. She hadn't slept. Neither had her brother Michael, who sat silent at the table, his eyes bloodshot, his fingers nervously spinning the cap of a thermos. "There was something out there," he finally said. His voice was quiet but resolute. "Last night, on the ice. I saw it." Emma turned from the window. "You were sleepwalking again." Michael shook his head. Once, hard. "No, I wasn't. I remember everything. I was looking for—" He paused. "For something. For someone." They both looked at the lake in silence. The local sheriff, a heavy-set man with kind eyes named Amos Blaine, arrived around midday in response to Emma's earlier call. He listened patiently to their story. Michael's wandering, the girl on the ice, the red scarf, the humming. But as his notepad filled, his expression grew colder. "I shouldn't tell you this," he finally muttered, lowering his voice. "But your story, it's not the first time someone's claimed to see a girl skating out there." Emma's breath caught. "It started decades ago," Sheriff Blaine said, glancing back at the lake as if it could overhear. "Back in the 40s, after the war, local girl named Evelyn Crow, star skater, practiced alone every morning on the lake during the winter. Folks say she could skate like she was flying." Emma's heart dropped. That name. "She died out there, didn't she?" she whispered. Blaine nodded. "They found her skates embedded in the ice. No sign of a body. The ice was untouched otherwise, no cracks, no holes, just her skates, sitting there like she'd vanished into thin air. People searched for days, never found her." Michael stood, his hands clenched. "What was she wearing?" Blaine blinked, surprised. "Old folks say she wore a red scarf, hand-knit, like the one her mother wore during the war." Michael turned pale. Emma stepped in. "So, the legend says she still skates?" The sheriff's eyes darkened. "They say when the lake freezes just right, quiet, perfect, you can hear her skates at midnight, scraping across the ice. Some say if you see her, she'll try to pull you under, to skate forever with her." Michael laughed nervously. "Ghost stories." "Maybe," Blaine said, eyeing him. "But maybe not. Just don't go out there at night." That night, Michael didn't wait for midnight. He left just after dusk. Emma awoke to the front door creaking shut, cold wind curling into the hallway like a breath from the lake. She ran outside, her boots crunching in the snow, her flashlight cutting ribbons through the fog that had settled over Bemidji like a shroud. "Michael!" No answer. The ice groaned. She followed the trail, bare footprints leading directly from the shore to the center of the lake. There, in the distance, she saw them. Two figures. One stood still. The other spun. Her heart stopped. The second figure twirled with a grace that didn't belong to the living. Her dress was sheer against the moonlight, rippling like smoke. The red scarf fluttered unnaturally, as if pulled by invisible hands. Michael stood mere feet away, mesmerized. "Michael!" Emma screamed. The spinning stopped. The ghostly girl turned her head. No face, just hollowness, as if her features had been erased by time and frost. Michael stumbled backward. The ice beneath him groaned, louder now, more urgent. Emma dropped to her knees. "Michael, come to me. Slowly." But he didn't move. His eyes were locked on the girl's empty face. And then, crack. The ice beneath him spiderwebbed. She ran. Time slowed. Her flashlight fell, bouncing on the ice with a thud. She lunged, her hands scraping over the cold surface as she grabbed her brother by the collar and yanked him backward just as the ice collapsed beneath where he had been standing. Water churned. A low, keening wail rose from the hole, deep and aching, like a violin bow drawn across a frozen bone. The girl was gone. They scrambled back to shore, gasping, soaked with sweat despite the cold. Michael wouldn't speak for the rest of the night. The next day, Emma returned alone to the center of the lake. The hole was gone, refrozen, smooth, untouched. But there, embedded just beneath the surface, barely visible in the milky ice, was something chilling. A single red scarf. Suspended. Motionless. Waiting. The days following the hole's freezing over were oddly warm, relative to Bemidji's brutal depths, like the lake was trying to hold its breath. The wind had hushed, and the air tasted metallic. Emma and Michael barely slept, haunted by visions of the faceless skater and the skin-deep ice crack. Every night, the wind carried whispers across the porch, like a fleeting promise of dread. I returned to the lake edge more than once during the day, but my attempts at normality crumbled fast. There was no comforting bustle of winter activities, just an oppressive quiet that suggested something waiting, patient, eternal, and hungry. One evening, as the crimson sun sank below the pine line, I found Emma standing at the water's edge, arms wrapped in her jacket, tears glistening on her cheeks. "Tell me what you remember," I said solemnly. She inhaled, looked at me, and then swallowed. "It started months ago," she said, voice raw. "I began dreaming about her." She hesitated, searching my face. That night in mid-December, Emma woke in the pitch-dark kitchen. The house was silent except for the hum of the heater. Snowlight filtered in through small windows, painting shadows across the floor. She reached for her phone, but it was already unlocked. The screen displayed chains of text messages she had never sent. "She's on the ice. She sees you. She wants you to skate with her. If you skate, you'll never leave. I see her behind me every night." Emma said she dropped the phone, heart pounding, and ran upstairs to Michael's room. His bed was empty. The door to hers was closed. She heard soft scraping from inside. She pushed it open. Michael stood in the dark, facing his mirror. The red scarf he'd found was wrapped around his wrist. 2 thin cracks traced his arm above the scarf. "She was in the mirror," Emma whispered. "I screamed. He didn't hear me." I listened, the story settling over me like frost. I wanted to scream at her to stop, to run, to renounce the lake entirely, but her eyes were empty, distant, drawn to the ice, as if she saw Clara or Evelyn, or someone else gliding just beyond mortal sight. I stayed with them that night. We didn't sleep. We listened for creaks on the floor, distant scrapes on the frozen lake, the hush of the world waiting for midnight. We discovered more about Evelyn Crow through old town records, newspaper photos, and yellowing letters from local historians. Evelyn was 17 when she died in 1948, a year after Thomas Reed vanished. She'd been training for a national competition when she slipped onto the lake after dusk. Everyone believed her body sank beneath thick ice and vanished into cold water. But there were rumors, unfounded but persistent, that Evelyn had heard whispers urging her onto the ice that night, that strange locals kept leaving gifts on the frozen shore, scarves, flowers, carved wooden skates, as if offering a tribute to keep her from wandering deeper. Then, in her final notebook, found posthumously, Evelyn had written, "I feel her behind my eyes, guiding me across the ice. I skate for 2, for the one who could never learn to breathe in the cold." We spent hours circling that line. 2. Evelyn and who else? Who could breathe in cold water? And then it clicked. Thomas Reed. We realized the truth wasn't just in separate tragedies. It was entwined. Evelyn might have been skating for Thomas, but she stayed behind because of him. We hypothesized she'd tried to skate him home, or rescue him through the ice, and failed. Her spirit, bound by guilt and grief, kept skating alone in the moonlight, hoping to find him again. That night we returned to the lake under a full moon. The air was crystalline. The reflection of the moon on ice felt hypnotic. Emma carried Evelyn's final notebook, bound in fraying leather. Michael had packed scarves, a dozen red scarves, all hand-knit. We left them on the frozen shore, draped over a wooden bench chipped with frost, hoping they'd serve as markers. Then we waited, until the sound began, soft at first, like glass scraping metal, then stronger until each circle was distinct. Each loop tracked faint tracks in the snow. No footprints, just blade marks tracing an endless oval toward the heart of the lake. We didn't walk forward. We couldn't. Michael fell to his knees, tears streaming as he watched the ghost gliding alone, silently, her form delicate against the ice. Then something changed. The blade marks stopped circling and sharpened, forming a final straight line directly toward shore. The girl extended one arm. The breeze carried a whisper. "Help us." Evelyn's voice. We froze. Emma lifted the notebook, opened to the final page. I could read her words in the breeze. "Two lost souls, united in stillness. Find me. Skate for me." Michael stood, slowly. He reached for the ice, removed his glove. He took a single step forward. The ice under his breath cracked. His fingers trembled. Emma grabbed his arm. "Don't!" He didn't answer. He stepped again. I rushed forward, pain sharp in my chest like a block of ice. Michael stumbled, regained footing, and then knelt by the girl, offering the notebook, the scarves. They touched the ice. We waited. The wind quieted. The scraping stopped. And in the moonlight, two figures appeared, one smaller, translucent. A boy, Evelyn and Thomas, standing together, face to face, so close you could swear they held hands. Michael gasped. The ice cracked with sound, like a distant thunder. The wind swept the lake, stirring the scarves on the shore. Then, a flash. They skated once, together, perfectly in sync, Evelyn leading, Thomas following, and glided toward the edge. One by one they passed us, eyes locked on the horizon. Then they touched solid ground and stood. Evelyn turned to Michael, looked him in the eye. She nodded once, a gesture of thanks. Then she and Thomas faded softly, like breath lifting into air. And all at once, the scarves lifted in wind and scattered across snow. The sweeping arc of scarlet felt like a benediction. The aftermath didn't feel like victory, it felt surreal. Like the world tried to reclaim its breath after witnessing something impossible. Emma led Michael home. He was exhausted but calmer. The cracks on his arms began fading by morning. Nightmares receded. Fear, for now, loosened its grip. I stayed behind at the shore. The wind had died. The lake was smooth again, like before, pure. I flipped through Evelyn's notebook one last time. The words I read before skated into something new. Perhaps forgiveness isn't found on ice, but in witness. I realized that night we hadn't just witnessed a haunting, we'd delivered a kind of mercy. But the lake is patient, and the ice remembers. That winter passed without new disappearances, without scraping blades at midnight, without the shapes in fog. But that spring, when the ice melted, I found a blade of skates washed up on shore, its edges smoothed by time, but unmistakable. I pocketed it and carried it home. Mostly I keep it in a drawer now. Sometimes I take it out, run a fingertip over the metal edge. I recall the scraping, the moonlight, the figures passing, and I wonder what forgiveness looks like to a ghost. Because perhaps it's not a destination. Maybe it's a moment, a note, an offering, a pact kept. Snow fell in fine, almost silent flakes that winter. The kind that blankets everything without a sound, as if the world is holding its breath. But sometimes, silence is louder than thunder. Spring's thaw arrived slowly. The thick ice cracked and melted long after we stopped gathering by the shore. It felt like the end of something profound, but I knew better. Nothing ends here. Not really. By May, the lake had returned to its summer form, blue and deep and seamless. People paddle-boated, children splashed, anglers cast lines from docks. Life resumed. The town seemed relieved. That is, everyone except me. I carried her skate blade in my jacket pocket. I still traced it with my fingertips. It felt cold, powerless, but real. Emma and Michael moved on, eventually leaving Bemidji. College and work in distant cities. Still, we stayed in touch through the screen of a phone or a computer. We shared laughter, but also long silences. Because sometimes, on a spring night, I would wake up and hear ice cracking beneath my window. I'd stare at the moonlight, haunted by memories of the pact we made, tokens of forgiveness exchanged on frozen fields. The ghosts graced us briefly, then vanished. But I keep waiting for a sign, for the ice to remember. Silent Echoes. One evening in April, I took a walk by the lake. It was a mild dusk. Pink and purple streaks clouded the sky. The water lapped gently at the shore. The chill of winter was gone, replaced by the mild promise of spring. I paused near the spot where we had stood 6 months earlier. A single paddleboard floated lazily, unmanned. I knelt to pick up a smooth pebble, cold, wet, and perfect, and heard a distant whisper over the water. Skate. No wind. No one else around. Just that soft voice echoing like a memory in the ripples. I stood, gaze sweeping the lake's surface. Waited. Nothing moved. But I felt watched. I left quickly, heart pounding. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I dreamt of ice again, but clear and black and infinite. I skated alone. No wind, no moon. Just me and the echo of thin blades cutting through the surface. I skated and skated until I reached a figure ahead. It was Evelyn, glowing white. She skated circles inside circles, repeating. I watched for minutes, hypnotized by the rhythm. When I drew closer, I realized she wasn't alone. There was a second figure, Thomas. They skated together. He reached for her, she held his hand. I understood, in a silent heartbreak, that they played out that loop every night in that dream. And I was intruding. I woke with tears cold on my face. Echoes of the pact, that spring, the summer fair rolled into town. Ferris wheels, cotton candy, shouts of children, familiar laughter. All signs of life's unstoppable march. The lakefront stage was set for a folk singer from Minneapolis. I was there watching Emma perform her accordion piece. Michael played backup guitar. They dedicated it to the ones who skate on memory. The audience clapped. I smiled wryly. Afterward, Michael came to me. He held a small wooden box. "Read this," he said. Inside, Evelyn's ledger page, the final handwritten note we found, preserved under glass. And a note from Emma. "One day, when stones fall silent and blades lie still, remember we kept our promise. Remember forgiveness isn't only for the living." I nodded. The weight of words resonated in my hands like the skate blade once had. A final note in a symphony I couldn't forget. Chapter Shadows at the Shore. Late June arrived. The solstice moon hung heavy. Emma and Michael were back for the weekend. We planned to gather by the beach, light a bonfire, toast to summer's start. Around midnight the sky was clear, stars rippled above, and we stood on the shore. The breeze blew warm now, but I could still feel the cold breath of winter. That familiar hush spread. I shivered. Michael spoke first. "Do you think they ever come?" His voice drifted across the water. "Who?" "Evelyn, Thomas. Ghosts? Memories?" He hesitated, swallowed. "Them. The girl, the boy. Do you think they really skate still?" I remained silent, because I did. We left the fire behind and walked on the sand. The moonlight chased ripples across the bay. We stopped at where the ice had cracked, where the scarves lay, where forgiveness was carved into winter's heart. "If they do," I said slowly, "they show up only when we remember. Only when we honor the silence." The wind shifted. I felt, then heard it. A whisper. A scrape. Very soft. "Together." Michael glanced at me. Emma's eyes widened. The night air cracked with recognition. We stepped back, heartbeats shared, breath caught. But there was no girl, no boy, just a lake reflecting stars and memories. And I realized forgiveness, for them, means staying. Staying in memory. Staying alive. A farewell that never ends. In late July, I packed my life into boxes, preparing to leave Bemidji again. Not forever, life pulled me elsewhere. But this time, I carried the lake within me. That morning, sunlight warmed the water. The breeze carried new life. Frogs in the reeds, birds overhead. Normal. I walked to the shore one last time. The sand shifted underfoot. I placed the skate blade gently on the sand. Beside it, I set a pebble, pocked, blackened from years underwater. I knelt, picked up Starlight Pebble and turned toward the blade. I spoke. To Clara, from another story. To Evelyn and Thomas, for letting us help. I left them there, pebble and blade side by side like a memorial. But as I turned to leave, I heard it. A soft scrape on water. Very small. I glanced back. Ripples had formed in a perfect circle. No wind. Just motion. And then, nothing. No figure. No light. Just water echoing back silence. Years passed. Emma released her folk album. Michael taught music. I wrote a piece about forgiveness slowly healing a frozen lake. We stayed connected long after the waters melted and refroze. I moved east. I built a life. A family. A home with mirrors that held just everyday reflections. But late at night, when the world grows quiet, I sometimes stand in front of them, touch my fingers to the glass. I feel that old chill, a whisper echoing. Together. Just once. And I smile. Because on the ice, in the silence, when the spirit of two skaters glided one last time, they left behind a pact, a promise, that forgiveness lives where memory remains, that death on ice is not an end, but a perpetual dance, and yes, the spirit of Lake Bemidji still skates alone, but sometimes we skate with her.